HOA neighbor destroyed my $300,000 Lamborghini with a cinder block. She had no idea who she was dealing with on a Saturday afternoon in a quiet, gated neighborhood. My next-door neighbor walked out of her house, picked up a cinder block, and caved in the hood of my $300,000 Lamborghini. Then she dragged it the full length of the driver's side panel while I was standing 20 feet away watching. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that I was already recording, and that was the least of her problems. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story did not start with a cinder block. It started with a note on my windshield, then another, and by the time Brenda decided to pick up that block, she had spent months building toward a moment she thought would finally drive me out of a neighborhood she had decided I did not belong in. I had spent years in military service, doing things in places most people only read about. I had made life-altering decisions under pressure that would have broken most people. I had come home carrying the kind of exhaustion that does not leave after a single good night of sleep. What I needed more than anything else was peace. What I found instead was Brenda. Before I found her, though, I found the car. After everything I had survived, I wanted something that reminded me every single morning that I had made it through. A Lamborghini, just over $300,000. My money, my choice, my reminder. I drove it home the day I closed on the house, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. I had researched the neighborhood carefully before buying. Gated community, reasonable HOA documents, quiet streets, good distance between houses. Everything looked right on paper. What no document mentioned anywhere was that the woman living next door had appointed herself the permanent moral authority of the entire street. Brenda had been involved with the HOA for years and treated that involvement like a military rank she had personally earned. She had opinions about every property on the block, and she expressed those opinions through the HOA the way some people use a megaphone, loudly, frequently, and with complete certainty that the volume alone made her right. Within my first week, she had already measured my lawn, not looked at it, measured it. She arrived with an actual tape measure and informed me that the grass was a fraction of an inch beyond the permitted length specified in the community covenants. I trimmed it the same afternoon without argument. I thought that was the end of it. I was very wrong. The complaints kept coming. My trash cans had been visible from the road for slightly longer than she considered acceptable on collection day. A paint sample I had placed on my fence while deciding on a color was an unapproved modification. The car was too loud, too bright, too visible, too much of everything she had decided the neighborhood did not need. Then the windshield notes began. Handwritten, precise, unsigned, and designed to communicate one thing clearly: you do not belong here, and I want you to know I know it. This is not a racetrack, said one. Some of us value peace and quiet, said another. Each one left in the same spot, on the same glass, in the same handwriting. I responded the way I respond to almost everything, with patience and quiet compliance. Lawn trimmed, bins brought in immediately, car kept in the garage whenever possible, engine never revved at any hour. I was not trying to win anything. I simply wanted to be left alone to build the life I had been working toward for years. Brenda read my patience as weakness. That is the fundamental mistake people like her always make. When low-level pressure does not produce the result they want, they do not reconsider the approach. They conclude that more pressure is required. The notes became more frequent. The HOA complaints became more detailed. The stares across the driveway became less disguised. I had watched this pattern before, in completely different settings. Someone decides you do not fit their version of a space, and begins a slow campaign, designed to make your presence feel expensive enough that leaving seems easier than staying. I had never left a position because staying was uncomfortable. That was not about to change over a suburban driveway and a woman with a tape measure. The Saturday it happened, I was at my kitchen table, going through a box of old service items, medals, photographs, letters, the kind of things that weigh more than their size suggests. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet I had been genuinely enjoying. Then I heard the sound, a heavy impact, Then the long, grinding shriek of something hard being dragged across a surface at speed. My body processed it before my mind did. I was outside before the echo finished, and what I saw stopped me completely for one full second. Brenda was standing beside my Lamborghini, holding a cinder block. A second block was on the ground at her feet. The hood had been caved in by the first impact. The windshield had fractured into a web of cracks from corner to corner, and running the full length of the driver's side panel was a deep, ugly gash where she had dragged the block slowly through every layer of paint down to bare metal. She looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone who has just done something irreversible and is standing in the gap between the action and the consequences, waiting to see which direction everything falls. There was something wild behind her eyes, but also something that had not yet fully calculated the weight of what she had just done. Every high-pressure situation I had ever been in had taught me the same thing. The person who stays calm holds every advantage. The person who reacts emotionally hands it away immediately. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started recording without saying a single word. I walked slowly around the car, documenting every point of damage: the hood, the windshield, the full length of the panel gash, both cinder blocks on the ground. Then I turned the camera toward her and held it steady. Her expression shifted the moment the lens faced her. Something more calculating moved in behind the wildness. She straightened up and told me this would teach me to bring my lifestyle into the neighborhood. She said the car was a nuisance. She said I was a nuisance. She said maybe now I would finally leave. Every word recorded. Every word in her own voice, explaining her own motive in real time. I lowered the phone slightly and looked at her directly. "Brenda," I said, keeping my voice completely level, "you have just made the biggest mistake of your life. You have destroyed over $300,000 worth of private property. You have committed a felony on camera in broad daylight, and you have explained exactly why you did it in your own words while I was recording." She told me she was the HOA president and she would have me evicted. I told her the HOA had no authority over what she had just done, and that the people who did have that authority were approximately 4 minutes away, because I had already called them before I finished my first sentence to her. For the first time in all the weeks of notes and complaints and stares, she looked at me the way someone looks at a situation that has moved completely beyond their ability to manage it. Not the quiet neighbor she had been leaving messages for, something she had fundamentally miscalculated from the very beginning. The patrol cars arrived quickly. Brenda shifted immediately into performance mode. Her voice changed, her posture changed, and she began constructing a version of events that bore almost no resemblance to what had occurred. She claimed I had threatened her. She claimed the car was a danger to children. She claimed my behavior had escalated the situation. The officers listened professionally and then reviewed the footage. It was clear, steady, and complete. It showed the damage, both cinder blocks, and Brenda's own words, in her own voice, explaining her motive, without any ambiguity in any frame. There was no version of the footage that supported her account of events. As the officers completed the process of placing Brenda in the patrol car, her husband came sprinting out of their front door. He was apologizing before he reached me, words tumbling over each other. "Please," he kept saying. "She did not mean it. She gets carried away sometimes. Please do not press charges." I looked at him calmly. "She walked out of your house," I said. "She picked up a cinder block. She caved in the hood of my car. She cracked the windshield. She dragged the block the full length of the driver's side panel. And then she explained on camera exactly why she did all of it. That is not getting carried away. That is premeditated felony vandalism with a recorded confession attached." He had no answer for that. I told him I would be speaking with my attorney first thing in the morning, and that he should do the same. I went back inside, and the neighborhood went very quiet. The following weeks moved through insurance assessors, legal consultations, and preliminary court proceedings. The HOA held an emergency meeting and removed Brenda from her position before the week was finished. They had seen the footage. They understood immediately that being formally associated with what she had done created significant legal exposure for the entire organization. The insurance company sent a damage assessor who spent 2 hours with the car, the structural impact to the hood, the complete windshield replacement requirement, and the full-length panel damage combined to push the repair estimate past the threshold for a total loss determination. The car was written off, and the full policy value was paid out. Brenda's legal defense began immediately and went nowhere fast. Her attorney reviewed the footage early in the process and advised the family plainly. The video made a successful defense in either the criminal or civil proceeding essentially impossible. The only real question from that point forward was the size of what they would eventually owe. A local reporter picked up the story through the initial police report and began researching my background. The piece they ran included my service record, my campaign history, and my commendations. It described a decorated veteran who had purchased a home and a car with money he had earned, complied with every rule he had been asked to follow, and watched his neighbor destroy his property because she disapproved of how it looked. I heard from another neighbor that when Brenda and her husband read the article together, the color left both their faces at the same moment. The man they had targeted for months was not who they had decided he was. The car she had destroyed was not a symbol of a lifestyle she disapproved of. It was a symbol of what a person builds after surviving things most people never face. The community response shifted completely after the article ran. Neighbors who had stayed quiet during the months of notes and complaints began coming forward with their own accounts. Stories emerged of other interactions, other pressure tactics, other complaints filed through the HOA to push people rather than address genuine issues. The full picture formed slowly, and it was not flattering. Brenda eventually accepted a plea arrangement that included a felony conviction, structured restitution payments that her attorney confirmed would follow her for years, and terms attached to her record permanently. The civil judgment ran alongside the criminal outcome and added a second layer of financial obligation that their defense team had warned them about from the beginning of proceedings. They listed the house within 3 months of the final judgment. The neighborhood watched them move out on a quiet weekday morning. The house sold quickly. They relocated somewhere I never learned the name of and did not spend time thinking about. I was not carrying anything toward either of them. There was no room in the life I was building for that weight. I took the insurance payout back to the same dealership, worked with the same consultant, ordered a new one in a different color. The consultant recognized me from the news piece and shook my hand for a long time before we sat down at his desk. I drove it home the same afternoon. I also found a new place to live. Not because anyone had driven me out. I want to be clear about that. I left on my own timeline for my own reasons, the same way I have made every significant decision in my adult life. I found a property with more land, more distance between houses, and the kind of quiet that comes from space rather than rules. The new place has a long driveway and neighbors far enough away that their business is genuinely theirs and mine is genuinely mine. In the mornings, the loudest sound is birds and wind and the particular silence of open land that belongs to you completely. I found what I had been looking for. It just took a longer and more complicated path than I had originally planned for. The Lamborghini sits in a proper garage now, with room around it to see the whole car at once. Different color than the first one, but carrying the same meaning. A reminder of distance traveled. A reminder that the things you build after surviving hard things belong entirely to you, and no one has the right to take them. There is something I understood a long time ago, and this situation confirmed in a way I had not expected. People who mistake quiet for weakness almost always push until they discover what is actually underneath it. The discovery is rarely what they expected. And by the time they understand what they were actually dealing with, the situation has already moved well past the point where that understanding helps them. Document everything. Stay calm. Know exactly what you own and what you are owed. And never allow someone else's certainty about who you are to create uncertainty in yourself about it. The quiet ones are not quiet because they have nothing. They are quiet because they already know what they have, and they do not need anyone else to confirm it.